Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein, and the world is on fire. How are you, sir?
I'm enjoying the shenanigans, you know? I got to follow the news, whether it's interesting or boring, and things are taking exciting turns. I'm having fun.
Yeah, it's not like, you know, even when the news is really boring, we got to sit here and talk about negative interest rates or something like that. So we might as well have some real exciting stuff to be breaking down. Of course, how's the touring going? You're out on the road this weekend, I believe, Rob.
Yes, you probably just missed me in Philly if you're listening to this, but you can come to Bernstein Mills, West Virginia. You can come out. I'm going to be outside of Cleveland, and then already next week I've got outside of Nashville, Memphis, and then headed to California for some gigs with Brian McWilliams, who was just on the show.
Yes, we love Brian here on the show. That was a fun episode. And then, of course, we'll be back in Nashville next week at Zany's live stand-up show and a live Part of the Problem podcast. Come on out to that. ComicDaveSmith.com for all my dates for the rest of the year. We got a bunch of stuff coming up. All right. So as we are recording this, it is the morning of day 4 of the Republican National Convention. We're going to jump on and do a live stream in the morning so that we can react to Donald Trump's speech and some of the other big speakers today. From what I understand, there's going to be some other very interesting speakers coming on today. We've gotten, I believe it's been confirmed that Hulk Hogan will be speaking. No word on the Ultimate Warrior yet, but Hulk Hogan will be there. Will be there tonight, and there's some other speakers who I'm very interested to see. So we'll jump on and do a live stream reacting to that. So this will be a little bit out of order. You'll see that one, and then you'll see this one. But we actually recorded this one first. Last night, J.D. Vance spoke. Some other less notable people spoke. It's not been the best show so far, but today is the big day. Today's show day, you know? I guess there was the other big moment that everyone's talking about. I guess Donald Trump Jr. spoke, and he brought out his daughter, Donald Trump's granddaughter, which was a very sweet speech that she went up and gave. It's Donald Trump, you got to say, one of the things that's really impressive about the guy is that for a guy like him, like a billionaire who was kind of like known as a playboy, was the host of a big TV show, and was, you know, just known for like always being at the parties and being with a lot of different women, and then becomes a politician. It doesn't fit with that archetype that you would have all of your kids around you. They'd all be kind of impressive people. They would all speak nothing but glowingly about you. You know what I mean? And there is something about that that's kind of impressive that does play very well for him. But anyway, I don't know if I have too much more to say about the Republican convention so far. It's been, let's say, I'm sure the Israelis have been enjoying it. Seems to be a lot of that. A lot of people bragging about how much we love Israel and how much the Democrats hate Israel. But there hasn't been anything that was like particularly interesting to me in terms of the speakers. It was more, the most interesting thing so far has been Donald Trump's entrances. Can I ask you this, Rob? Because I'll tell you, one of the things I've been wondering about is like Donald Trump, the man himself, and how he's doing. And something seems a little different about him. Like he seems a little bit more somber and maybe even, dare I say, a little shooken up. We haven't heard from him yet, but there is something in just like just the way he looks to me. He looks like he's affected by what happened. And I wonder how, even for someone like Donald Trump, who has this, I wouldn't even describe him as superhuman, but he doesn't seem like he's the same as the rest of us. You know what I mean? Like he just looks like he was made like in a lab on a game show or something like that. But he did almost have his brains blown out in front of a giant crowd of people. And that's got to mess with you a little bit.
I have not been watching that much of the Republican National Convention, but from what I see of Trump, I see the exact opposite of a guy.
You think he's unaffected?
No, a guy who just reconfirmed the fact that he's manifesting our reality. And that if he was
maybe.
shot, it would have gone dark for all of us. It's unbelievable what's happening at the Republican National Convention right now, that you've got basically all the people that were opposing him showing up, trying to get jobs, Nikki Haley giving the endorsement. The entire party has been reshaped in his populist image, and there's some real stupidity there. Maybe, there's enough exciting stuff. Maybe we don't have to talk about all the tariff talk. But anyways, it seems to me like he's taken a full-fledged glory lap, and the reason why you see him more subdued is because he's so far ahead in winning. He doesn't have to have his usual grandioseness. He can actually be more reserved and have better etiquette because he's won. He's like, you know what I mean? He's sitting there. He's 5 laps ahead in the race, and now he gets to be calmer and play it a little bit more down the middle, and he's winning. It's over.
Well, I mean, look, the latest wrinkle in all of this is that Joe Biden just announced he had tested positive for COVID. And it is hard to overstate how much the optics have been in Donald Trump's favor over the last several weeks. It's unlike anything else. There's not even another presidential election that you could come close to comparing it to. Like, I don't know if you remember, Rob, and I don't remember this. I know of it, but I don't even know if I was born yet. But what was it? It was Dukakis, put on the, he took a ride in a tank and put on the helmet, and he just looked ridiculous. And people credit that for losing him the race. It was he just looked ridiculous. He didn't look presidential. Right. I mean, Joe Biden, after that catastrophic debate performance, then goes on all these interviews and is mixing up names and stuttering and just looking terrible. Then Donald Trump, survives this near assassination. He's throwing the fist up with blood on his face. He just looks so good. And now Joe Biden is canceling campaign events because he got COVID. Just the optics of it are so bad when you're trying to fight off the idea that you look weak and frail and physically not fit enough to do the job. I would say, I think the real scandal here, Rob, is that clearly Joe Biden is not vaccinated.
Because that's the only way he could have gotten it?
Yes, you can't. Listen, I have it on good authority that if you get the vaccine, you cannot get COVID. And he got COVID. So do the math, Rob. What's the logical conclusion of that? The guy's unvaccinated.
Yeah, they seem to be living in the past where they think, hey, we spend so much money scaring the bejesus out of everyone about COVID. So if he's got COVID, he gets a pass. And they're taking it as an opportunity to regroup, get him back in the basement. That's how he won the first time. You know, you got to go back to your roots in training sometimes. Sometimes you tried a different trainer for the second.
Back to the basement. I like that.
Yeah, you got to go back to the basement. You know, they sat down with him and they went, Rock, you can't beat him, Rock. And he's like, all right, I'm going back to the basics, back to the basement. We got to regroup. We got to get him off the interviews. Let's tell the world that he has COVID. And, you know, I was joking. What were the symptoms? Was he not talking coherently?
Well, it is, dude, on top of everything else. It's like we're fully immersed in just like cartoon world here. But on top of everything else, like we were saying, like the optics of how bad this makes him look, it also is a reminder of one of his biggest lies. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, we're going way back to 2 years ago now, but for the first 2 years of this guy's administration, his number one priority was getting the jab in as many arms as he could by any means necessary, under the promise that if you get this, you can't get COVID. And it's just like one more reminder. You know, I'm sure Joe Biden would claim to be up to date with his vaccinations or whatever. And it's one more reminder like, oh, yeah, remember that thing that they all lied to us about that they got completely wrong. How about that?
At this point, you can't both claim, hey, I'm youthful enough to do the job, but I'm also really afraid of COVID. And I better be responsible if I have it. I better go back to my house and spend some time indoors to nurse the fact that I've got COVID, the thing that only kills the frail and the old.
Yeah, it's bad. And especially that he's so frail and old that he kind of is the type of person that you'd be like, oh shit, COVID. That's a big deal for you. That's nothing for anyone else, but for you, that's a pretty big deal. Like if Joe Biden wasn't the corrupt politician that he is, but if someone in your family was in the shape that Joe Biden's in and they got COVID, you'd be nervous. You'd be like, oh shit. You'd be checking in every day. You know what I mean? You'd be like checking in. Is how sick is he? Okay. All right. What are we, 4 days into it? Okay. He's not that sick. He's fine. But you'd be worried about him getting really sick.
Hey, now's the time to call Grandpops. If you haven't spoken to him recently, better give him a call.
That's really the message. That's really always been the message of this show. Give your grandpa a call. A little bit more.
I'm wondering, and I'm sure you've got this thought as well. It seems like there has never been more pressure on him across the board to step down. You had Nancy Pelosi apparently had to sit down with him and said, hey, you can't win, and this is going to affect us in Congress also. I've seen reporting that the Democrats are nervous after what happened with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They've already had an experience with old people not realizing that they can't do it anymore and costing the party tremendously. Apparently, Obama sat down with people to say, hey, I think this is the end of the run. Chuck Schumer, I've seen headlines about. The news stations are on full force with, hey, it's time to step down. Who's profiting off of him staying in the race that they're not advising him to step down? So I'm wondering if this COVID is going to be the pivot to, hey, I was fine a week ago, but turns out I've got really long COVID that I had dementia before it started. And now it's time to call it.
Well, it does seem like there were a few days after Donald Trump's assassination attempt where there seemed to be a pause in the slow-moving coup to overthrow Joe Biden. That has certainly picked back up, and the stuff you're talking about is a big part of the reason there. But when you have Obama and them coming out also in an interview with Lester Holt the other day, or it was on 2 days ago, I think, Joe Biden did finally say, they said, is there anything that would get you to step down? And he goes, maybe like a health event. And then the next day he announces he has COVID. So it does seem like the coup is back on. And when I say the coup, I mean, all I mean by that is that, and this is like a coup in the best sense of the term, like, the guy's incompetent and not fit to serve. But by the democratic process, Joe Biden won the primaries, right? I mean, we all know democratic primaries are open and fair. And so he won the primary, and it should be his choice. And he's told people over and over again that he's made his choice and that his choice is to run. And yet every single day, we're still seeing new reports about who's putting pressure on him. And so if the democratically elected candidate chooses to take the position he was democratically elected to, and outside forces try to overthrow him, what do you call that? I mean, it might be the best, it's the Democratic mantra, at least since 2016, has been, George W. Bush in 2008. It's we have to overthrow democracy in order to save democracy. So that's it. In order to make sure that we have a democracy, we have to violate every democratic norm. Well, that's where they are.
Lucky for Biden, if he's looking to stay in the race and lose it, Kamala might be leading the coup, which means it might fail.
So that is listen, Kamala is not leading this thing. She might be trying to get in on it, but she's not leading it. This is way above her pay grade. It has been interesting to watch some of the media reaction to all of this stuff. She's been fun throughout all of this, but here is Joy Reid, perhaps the most unhinged member of the corporate media. Here was her take the other night from the convention.
These two men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird situation. We'll figure that out one day. But his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID Should he be fine in a couple of days? Doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same?
It should.
I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
I mean, what's funny is that whoever the important people are at MSNBC, they don't share their notes with Joy Reid. Like, she just has no idea. She's like, are we throwing him over the bus? Or are we still? No, I'm still finding a way to defend. Yes, Joy Reid, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Getting in the midst of an assassination attempt, having blood trickle down your cheek, stopping your own Secret Service to throw up a fist. If there's anything else that embodies that type of courage, it would be Joe Biden being sick. Yeah, you're right. The optics for him are actually great, Rob. This is really wonderful for the president.
I think we're moving towards a new era of news that I'm excited for, where these people are only going to exist to be our comedic fodder. The only ratings are going to be as the internet parades their clips is look at these dumbasses, especially as more as the baby boomers die off who are still just integrated into, hey, I turn on my television and I watch the news. But, I mean, this is loony world stupidity. We all saw it with our own eyes. Donald Trump got back to his feet, somehow dodged a bullet, stood up and said, fight, fight, fight. And, I mean, tried to get his shoes back. His shoes were important to him. I'm not leaving here without my shoes.
I mean, it really was just unbelievable.
And yet Joe Biden coming back from COVID, I'm assuming, I mean, they don't report on this stuff anymore, and, you know, it's out of the news and they're not forcing it down our throats. So I'm not as up on it as I was before, but I would just assume the latest variants are not as deadly as the OG COVID.
Oh yeah, no, she's trying to pretend that that's not part of this at all. Like, it's like, oh no, it's this thing that's very deadly. So if he comes back, the problem is in some sense, Joy Reid there's a little bit of a straw that she's grasping at. Like, I did think that when Donald Trump in late 2020, he got COVID and he was back out like a couple days later and looked fine. And then, yeah, it does kind of look good for you. It's like, yeah. Kind of a reminder, hey, like I'm a little bit old, but I'm in good health and I can handle this. This, of course, was also COVID in 2020. Not COVID in 2024, which, like, let's get real, very few people are actually dying from. Back then, it was like a thing where it was, especially the way the fear-mongering campaign had been going. It actually, it wasn't as scary as it should. It wasn't as scary as they were making it out to be, but it still was something that you were like, oh, you don't want to be old and get this. It's a pretty nasty virus. Donald Trump also, if you remember this, Rob, it was actually a kind of interesting moment where Donald Trump said, don't let fear of this virus rule your life. Like, it's fine. I'm going to be okay. Now, Donald Trump, of course, was saying this in late 2020. It would have mattered a lot more had he said that when it really mattered in early 2020. But there was something powerful about this time when we were still in like a quasi lockdown world. And Donald Trump was like, hey, don't let fear rule your life. And then he came back and he was Trump. He was the same. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, a brand new sponsor we're thrilled to have on board, and it is Qualia Senolytic. Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. Your life goals in your career and beyond require productivity. But let's be honest. Yep. As we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their body. Senescent cells cause symptoms of aging, such as aches and discomfort, slow workout recoveries, sluggish mental and physical energy associated with the middle-aged feeling. Also known as zombie cells, they are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they're taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like pruning the yellowing and dead leaves off of a plant, Qualia Senolytic remove those worn out senescent cells to avoid for the rest of them to thrive in the body. Take it just 2 days a month. The formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of ingredients together. There's a 100-day money-back guarantee. This clinically tested 2-day rejuvenation regimen may hold the key to unlocking cellular health and revitalizing aging tissue throughout the body. New research on aging and longevity, including a clinical study on Qualia senolytic, shows that senolytic supplementation can play a huge role in enhancing how we age. So resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia senolytic by going to their website, qualialife.com/problem for up to 15% off, and use the promo code problem at checkout for an additional 15% off. For your convenience, Qualia senolytic is also available at select GNC locations near you. That's qualialife.com/problem, QUALIA life.com/problem for an extra 15% off your purchase. And thanks to Qualia for supporting today's episode. All right, let's get back into it. Joe Biden has already, I mean, did you see just in this interview with Les Holster where he couldn't remember Lloyd Austin's name? Did you see this part where he was bragging about how he had the black defense secretary and then just couldn't remember his name, went to try to say his name, started with a completely wrong name, and then just bailed on it. And then because
the guy whose prostate is even worse than mine. That guy. I stood next to him. We try and squeeze out urine.
I will say that there has, I think I mentioned this before on the podcast, but obviously Joe Biden's cognitive abilities have been, impaired for years now. But there is no question. There has been like a steep decline. And at some point this year, and to the point where now it's really been exposed because in the wake of the debate, they made him do all of these appearances to try to get a good one in, to try to like win back the narrative a little bit. But it seems to me, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this, but it seems pretty clear to me that whatever his state used to be and whatever cocktail of drugs they used to be able to get him on, or maybe they're still getting him on the same cocktail, but it's just not working the same way. But it used to be like he could get through an interview or get through a speech and sometimes be reasonably, never impressive or good, but like he could survive it without catastrophic moments. And then like maybe 1 out of every 3 speeches or interviews, he'd have really bad moments in them. His situation seems to have degraded substantially since then, whereas every single one is bad now. And he seems to not be able to get through one speech or one interview without really bad moments in them.
So listen, it's hard to know what's cognitive decline. I can't say this is an absolute. It seems to me it's more he's taking a higher volume of these speeches and they're not being as light and gentle with him. And so if you want to just say, if I had to attribute the increase in slip-ups, it's the little bit of pushback. It's the little bit of more pointed questions. It's a little bit of the anchors not just stepping into cover for him.
Right.
I think all those factors are what's creating more of the moments. And then I think there's also a little bit of just the rattling of you get presented to the universe as the guy, oh, you have dementia. And then you're kind of almost fighting against the universe's perception of what your role is supposed to be. And I think all of those things are kind of taking its toll.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I suppose it is all of these things. I guess I'm also judging on the fact that he looks worse. He just looks even worse. Not that he's looked good in the past, but he looks like he really looks like older and more senile. I do think that's those are fair points that you bring up. Those elements play a role too. And, I had been talking about this. In fact, I've talked about this on the show for, I think a couple years now at this point. But one of the things that we were saying, and this is why we were saying there was a good chance Joe Biden wasn't going to be the nominee, we've been saying this for a while, is that, he had to run a real campaign this time. That he wasn't going to be able to hide out in his basement the whole time. That in 2020, the stars kind of aligned for him where there was this perfect excuse. The excuse built in was, hey, we're in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and so I'm being responsible by staying home. And you could, in fact, have the entire media criticizing Donald Trump for having outdoor events. By the way, just to like remind everybody, because I know this was a lifetime ago, but 4 years ago at this time, that was a controversial thing, that Donald Trump was having outdoor events. That's still where we were, the idea with the hysteria around COVID. But you could see where there was at least a plausible propaganda narrative there, right? This guy is doing these super spreader events, whereas this guy is being responsible. No one's getting COVID from him because he's in his basement. You weren't going to have that in 2024. Clearly, he was going to have to run a campaign of some sorts. And then the question becomes, is he capable of doing that? Is Joe Biden capable of doing these events and doing interviews over and over again? And we've, I think, clearly, at least with all the factors that you like added in there also, we could at least say pretty conclusively that with his age in 2024, without the media completely carrying him and with him having to do these events like all the time, that no, he's not up to that. He is not capable of doing it. And I think that's been demonstrated. Look, in every single one, in every single like subsequent interview since that debate, he's had a major gaffe moment. And I don't mean gaffe, I mean like a major demonstration of his inability to think and speak clearly. Like every single one. There was the one where he called himself the first black vice president. There was the one where he introduced Zelensky as Putin. He referred to Kamala Harris as Donald Trump. As I said on this most recent one, he couldn't remember Lloyd Austin's name. It's just every single appearance, there's something there that, rather than reassuring you that he's actually fit for the job, just reminds you that he is in no way fit for the job. What can you do with a candidate like that? Anyway, back to Joy Reid's point, the necessary element, like she's even saying there's a big if in her question, right? And her point was, if he bounces back in a few days, doesn't he come off looking just as strong as Trump taking a bullet? Well, obviously the comparison is stupid, but all of that aside, it's like, yes, if he came back and was capable of having a very competent interview where he demonstrated strength and an ability to think and speak clearly, then yeah, maybe you could make an argument that this helped him with the optics a little bit. But before COVID, he has yet to pull off one of these interviews or speeches. Even when he's just calling into a radio with the questions. Even in that interview, he struggled. So what are the odds that he's going to come back and just be a different person? It's not happening. He's not going to be the nominee. That's just that.
I'll throw some conspiracy at you.
And then, okay, throw some conspiracy at me. And then, Brian, just a heads up, I just sent you a Joe Scarborough video. We'll come to that afterward. But go ahead. What conspiracies you got, Rob?
Well, I just start wondering if they're outside of the margin of what they feel they can steal an election with. And if now they're starting to regroup and go, hey, we at least need to be within 2 points or within 1 point or whatever it is. And I'm not saying for sure that they stole the last one, but it seems to me like Biden is so far out that's not even an option.
Yes, I mean, I think I definitely think that's something to think about. That in order to even steal an election, you still have to have it be plausible that the guy you're stealing it on behalf of could have won, and we might be leaving that territory. Look, Kamala Harris has a lot of problems as a candidate. I mean, a lot of problems, but she's not Biden, like she's not going to go fall down. I mean, I guess she could.
She might laugh and talk about buses.
That she certainly might. She certainly might. However, there are the weaknesses that Joe Biden has are pretty unique to him in politics. And at least with Kamala Harris, you have a candidate who every time you put in an interview or a speech or a debate, you could feel reasonably comfortable that she's not just going to implode, start stuttering, forget where she is, forget who she's talking to. All right, even as I hear myself saying it, it's possible Kamala Harris could do all of that, but it's less likely than Joe Biden. And so I do think that seems to be the direction we're moving in, as crazy as it sounds. Did you see the Trump campaign, like the official campaign, what they said about a vice presidential debate?
No, but that sounds great. Sounds
juicy. So great. They said it's so like, this is only a campaign of Donald Trump's would ever do anything like this, but it was so great. They put out like an official statement from the campaign, and they said, we're not going to schedule a vice presidential debate yet, even though we've picked J.D. Vance as our vice president, because it would be insulting to Kamala Harris, who hasn't even chosen her vice president yet.
That's great.
It's just great. Like, Jesus, like, is there any worse dig you could have against your opponent than to just not even like you're trying to take him on? You're just like, no, we've all accepted that you're not man enough to do this job. So like, we're fine. Oh, that lady next to you, she's the man. You're okay, Grandpa. You're not even here. But I wonder who her VP is going to be. Anyway, brilliant trolling. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's episode, which is sheathunderwear.com, the underwear of legends. I'm wearing a pair of Sheath underwear right now because I'm always wearing a pair of Sheath underwear. If there are boxer briefs on my body, they are Sheath underwear because they are the most quality, comfortable underwear I've ever owned. I found them when they first started sponsoring this show over 3 years ago, and they sent me a couple pairs. And I loved them so much that I just went out and bought a whole bunch more and threw out the rest of my boxer briefs. This is the only underwear I wear because it's so great. And also, they've been a sponsor this entire time. So it's a loyal sponsor. I know the guys who run the company. They're great guys. So we really appreciate them being sponsors. If you want to support the people who support our show, and while you're at it, get the most comfortable pair of boxer briefs you will ever own, then go to sheathunderwear.com. Make sure to use the promo code problem20. That'll get you 20% off your next order. Sheathunderwear.com, promo code problem20 for 20% off your next order. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, on the theme of the media reaction to a lot of this stuff, let's check in with the show that is now allowed back on air, Morning Joe.
Mika, the sobering message he got yesterday from congressional leaders, and his biggest fundraiser was simple. We're losing, you're losing, and you're going to run out of money because the donors have left. So I don't know what those two or three in his inner circle are going to say to that. But the fact is, they don't know more than Nancy Pelosi about polling. They don't know more about contributors than Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's dedicated a good chunk of, the last decade to helping elect Joe Biden. And when you hear from congressional losers, we're losing.
Yeah.
You're losing.
Leaders. Yeah.
And the donors have all abandoned you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter what people are saying on the inside.
Like I said last hour, I believe deeply in President Joe Biden's ability to run this country. Yep. I also trust more than anybody I've ever met in politics, Nancy Pelosi's political acumen. So when she speaks, I listen, and I think a lot of other people do.
Pause that right there. Is it not? I think that was pretty much the end of the video, but is it just the statement, there's no one I trust more than Nancy Pelosi, is goddamn hilarious. Yes, there's a beacon of trust. But look, this was the same show, and it's interesting to watch, right? One of the things that the establishment corporate media has, and this is true in the political class too, but this is just true with corporate media, and it is one of the most impressive things about them, and I really mean this, is the message discipline is unreal. Like, it's unreal, the ability. Listen, dude, as somebody who over the last couple years got involved with the Libertarian Party, and I was a part of leading like the takeover of the party. The amount of envy I have for their message discipline, like the idea that you can get everybody repeating the same lines. And I know everybody, I'm sure everybody listening to the show has seen the video compilations from local news all the way up to national political news, where you just see the compilations where they all say the same thing in the exact same way, the exact same script, and they all read the exact same lines. That is not that easy to do. Like, you got to have a real badass system in place to get everybody to fall in line. And all of these people who consider themselves to be like independent individuals, you know what I mean? Like, not a single one of them breaks and just says something interesting that has their own unique thought. They all just follow the script. But it's amazing to watch. This show was the same show that was just a few weeks ago saying sharp as attack, deep fakes. Oh, all those videos of Joe Biden looking old, those are all, no, what was the term again? I'm sorry, cheap fakes. The shortest lived propaganda campaign ever. They're all cheap fakes. Joe Biden, sharp as attack. Behind closed doors, sharp as attack. Right? This is the best version of Joe Biden, said Joe Scarborough 3 weeks ago. And now they've all just conceded that he's got, not only is he not sharp as attack, imagine going from sharp as attack to so dull you need to drop out of the race in a few weeks. And they'd say it like as if with a straight face, as if they're not like just totally humiliated. I mean, like, Rob, it would be the equivalent of me coming out on this show and saying that, like, we need big government and perpetual wars and centralized regulation of the economy. Otherwise, society just collapses. We need all of those things. But I didn't say that with an air of like, guys, I've gotten this whole thing wrong. I've come into some new information. It's changed the way I look at the world. Let me take you with me on the journey of how I got from there to here. I just casually say it as if it's always what I've been doing, as if it's just always been what I believe. Like, imagine just saying that. Like, it takes a certain type of evil person. It takes a certain type of evil system in order to produce people who can do that. It's impressive.
Also, the way did she say the word acumen wrong, or am I retarded?
Well, how did she say it?
I don't even remember. But on the note of this clip, Brian, it's in the text thread from earlier today. I think it's worth playing. There was a longer version of this in the last minute of it. Joe Scarborough calls for Biden to step down, and what I thought was most interesting is
let's play that version.
Yeah, he says very directly it's time for Joe Biden to step down, and he accuses the Joe Biden aides.
Oh, did we just? I think we just didn't play the video to the end.
You can go down the list, and so yeah, Joe Biden has been at least by our count, Joe Biden's been an extremely successful president. I will say though, when you're told by members of Congress that they're losing, they're going to lose the House and the Senate if he stays on the ticket. When you're told by members of Congress who have seen the polls that you're losing swing states and that your numbers are going down in swing states, and states like Virginia, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Minnesota are now in play. And when your top fundraiser over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years is telling you the money's gone, the donors have all gone away, you know, it's really incumbent on people that are around Joe Biden to step up at this point and help the president and help the man they love and do the right thing. This is not going to end well if it continues to drag out. Look at the events of yesterday, the events of the last 3 weeks. And at some point, you know, I can tell you, Mike, the anger that I hear is not at Joe Biden. The anger I hear are at the people that are keeping him in a bubble.
Or who have their own interests.
Or who may have their own interests, some financial, in keeping him in the race. That is the real anger. And let me tell you, that's not just the anger from inside Congress. That is anger from inside the his own political camp. And it is widespread. It is widespread.
I just paused it already.
Biden,
I mean, it's just so funny, by the way. Here, you could cut this off. That's kind of what we wanted to get to. But I just love it. It's really funny to me that Joe Biden always he's I know I've mentioned this before, right? But Joe Biden does this thing because he's not very bright, and he's never been very bright. And now he's working with, the machine that thinks isn't working as well as it used to. But so Joe Biden's always had this thing in him where he's like, oh, people think I'm weak. I know what I'll do. I'll jog. That'll show them, right? Because no one will be able to see through that. See, I'm so clever that I'll just jog, and then everyone will think, wow, look at this young, capable, strapping man, and no one would be able to look at that and be like, oh, he's overcompensating for his own weakness by jogging up to a podium. That's very bizarrely. But so he does the same thing with yelling. He does the same thing when he comes off, he yells to show that he has energy and that he's passionate, but it just comes off like an old man yelling at you. Like, why would you want your president to be like, of ours is a fascism? And you're like, Jesus Christ, dude, this is terrible. Anyway, let's just break this down a little bit, because there's a few really fascinating elements to what Scarborough's trying to do here. By the way, as he lambasts everybody else for their own incentives, Joe Scarborough is clearly looking out for his own protection here. They're trying to find a narrative that makes him not the bad guy, right? Oh, why aren't you guys being honest with it? You're keeping him in this bubble where he thinks he's doing good. Yes, so were you up until 5 minutes ago. But Joe Biden makes the claim that Joe Scarborough makes the claim that Joe Biden has been a wild success as a president. Just a few things on that. Number one, because, it's easy. What happens with these propagandists is when you have, say, 3 weeks like the last 3 weeks have been, which, by the way, just to remind everyone, before what happened with Trump, we were saying this has been the craziest couple weeks in politics. It was already that debate performance being met with the Democratic establishment trying to force the current president out of his re-election campaign 4 months out from the election was already a huge story. This was before the televised assassination attempt of a president, okay? But so when things are this crazy in a few weeks, the propagandists always try to rewrite history. So let's just take a second to not let them do that. So just to be clear, when you say President Biden has been wildly successful, successes usually don't end in you being forced out of your re-election campaign before election night because people are so concerned over what a bloodbath it's going to be. That's usually not how successes work. Just to be clear here, Donald Trump has been winning in the polls for the entire year. The entire year, Donald Trump has been winning in the polls. And Donald Trump always does substantially better than he polls. So this bullshit about how Joe Biden's been a huge success, there have been no concerns about his age until the last few weeks. There have been no concerns about his performance. That's all just made up. That's just rewriting history. But it is amazing to see Joe Scarborough. It's funny when all these guys do it. It's like they're on one side of a clash, and they're over here we're going to get you guys, and then right as the clash comes, they jump onto this side and go, hey, you guys, you're crazy. What are you guys doing? You're leading into certain death. Dude, you were just on that team. You were just on that team. Literally at the start of the month, you were on that team. Just crazy.
I like the Dave Smith puppet show. If we could get more politics explained with the Dave Smith puppet show.
No, wrong. Blah, 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 blah. That's going to be the show from now on. Partoftheproblem.com, launching Monday. That's the new show.
I love
it. It's just puppets. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Prolon. These days, a lot of people are learning about all the benefits of fasting, like weight loss, mental and physical performance, and gut health, but worry about the whole no eating part. Well, that's exactly why Prolon was created. Prolon is a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at the University of Southern California's Longevity Institute and backed by leading U.S. medical centers, Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, supports cardiovascular health, and reduces abdominal fat. But Prolon isn't a diet. Prolon is science. Science based on Nobel Prize-winning discoveries in medicine. And this all starts with Prolon's 5-day program. Snacks, soups, and beverages all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. It's unlike anything you've ever heard of. I personally have always been interested in intermittent fasting, but I just don't like the idea of not eating anything at all. So this is perfect for me. And right now, Prolon is offering Part of the Problem listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. Just go to prolonlife.com/PTP. That's prolonlife.com/PTP. All right, let's get back into the show.
I also love that fact is, it seems to me like this has to be over for Biden when you've got the talking heads, talking like this and saying, hey, you got to do the right thing. It's also astonishing to me that he'll point fingers at, I guess, family, cabinet, or otherwise, and say that if this is for personal financial gain, that they'll stay in the race. Because usually, they'd be how dare you say that there's that level of corruption, or no, these are civil servants. This is the Democratic Party. Yeah. They're working in your interest. It's a pretty wild claim from Joe Scarborough to say, nope, this is about power, and that's why he refuses to step down. And actually, Joe Biden's honorable. It's just that there's people around him who are so interested in power and personal gain.
Yeah, Joe Scarborough stumbled into public choice theory finally. He's like, oh, these guys have their own incentives, and they're their own actors. Yeah, it's kind of interesting in a way, right? I didn't really think about that. It's a very good point. That you would go, well, look, there's all these people in the cabinet who are acting not in the interest of the country, but in their own possibly financial interest. It's like, wow, that maybe we should get a story about that every now and then. Maybe that should come up, not just right now when you're trying to save your own ass. Maybe you could have had a story about that. That was one of the things when I debated Chris Cuomo. That was one of my favorite moments that I had with him, where I was like, how come, we never ever see a story on CNN about any of this? How come you'll never see a story on CNN about big pharma corruption or big bank corruption, the secrecy of the Federal Reserve, the secrecy of the CIA? How come? That seems like a really good story, man. And it never comes up. You can watch CNN all day, every day, and never even know any of this stuff existed. It's just it's not important. But, when there's hard-hitting stories like some kid from a Catholic school in Kentucky smiled in a Native American's face, you guys are all over it. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, yeah, I agree with you. I honestly, I would at this point be very comfortable putting a large bet on Joe Biden not being the nominee. I'll go ahead and make a prediction here. It's 1:56 on July 18th as I'm saying this. Not only do I think Joe Biden will not be the nominee, I think he's going to be out very soon. As my guess is within the week. I think Joe Biden's going to be out of there. We'll see. But I do think that you're absolutely right when you look for these kind of key signals. And this is a big one. Look, I was talking about this earlier. I was on the Hill. Rising is the name of their show, on Rising. And Robbie Suave was interviewing me, and he was talking about, I forget exactly how it came up, but I brought up the Brian Stelter comment that he had made that we played on the show a few episodes ago about how he was like, well, look, this just shows how great the Democrats are, because when they have a situation like this, the Democrats consider switching nominees, but the Republicans would never consider switching nominees. Now, I was kind of going through the whole history of it, and where I was like, look, there's a real asymmetry here between Trump and Biden. However you feel about any of them, is that Donald Trump, they had a whole national review magazine on never Trumpers and how he has to step down. They had the previous nominee, Mitt Romney, come out and say it has to be anyone else except him. They had the RNC floating, changing the rules. And then this year, of course, you had all the big donor money go to DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They tried all the tricks to get Donald Trump to not be the nominee. The problem is that what Donald Trump has is tens of millions of Americans who undyingly support him, who want him to be the guy and no one else to be the guy. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has always been a product of the establishment, and he always required being carried. I mean, I'm saying just to sew up a primary, they had to have, Buttigieg and Kamala Harris drop out and endorse him, Elizabeth Warren stay in to steal votes from Bernie Sanders. I mean, the whole system had to carry Joe Biden through every step of this. And a huge part of that was the donor class, the political class, and the media class. All of them have carried Joe Biden for his entire presidency and probably before that. So to your point, when you see signals like the donor class has abandoned him, the political class has abandoned him, and the media class has abandoned him, well, you do the math. What does that tell you? If there's a guy who required all of these guys to carry them, and every one of them is signaling to you that they're dropping him, I don't care how many times they say, well, it's his choice to make, and if you look at the process, he has to decide to step down. So it's, yeah, that's what it says on paper. Kind of like Congress has to declare the wars, right? It says that on paper too. And the last war Congress declared was World War II. Okay? So actually, it turns out Congress doesn't have to declare the wars. Unless you just want to live in a fantasy world where what's written down on paper is real. In reality, Joe Biden needs to be carried by all these forces, and they're not carrying him anymore. And to your earlier point, I do still think I'm right that there's been a serious deterioration in his mental state. But to your earlier point, and it's a good one, that's a big part of why Joe Biden's looking worse than ever over the last few weeks, is because these forces that were carrying him have stopped. They've stopped carrying him. Okay. Before we end the show, there is one other topic that I wanted to address briefly, because it's kind of an interesting topic to me. It, in a sense, has been a broader conversation on the right, or perhaps just on the not left. But this has been a conversation for years. In fact, I remember doing podcasts about this back in 2016. But I don't know if you saw any of this, Rob, but there have been a couple stories that brought this to light. I guess there was one, and I'll confess immediately, I don't know all of the details about these stories, because I've just always, ever since I've been in this game, and I think this is because Ron Paul was my greatest hero, and I always just absorbed this from him, is that I always try, if we're going to talk about politics and talk about current events, I always try to focus on what I think the most important thing is. So you try to focus on the most important shit. And Ron Paul would always be talking about the wars and the Fed and the debt and authoritarianism and all this stuff. And it was well, why did he focus on all of that so much? And it was always obvious. He never even had to say it. It was just always obvious. It's because that's the most important thing. So that's why we focus on that, And so I try my best to not focus on things that I deem as just unimportant. Now that's not to say, I'm not saying I've never made a comment about a topic that wasn't the most important topic. I'm a human being, but generally speaking, I think on this show for many years now, if you look at the topics we focus the most on, they're typically the topics that we think are the most important thing going on. And so I'm prefacing by just saying, I don't know the exact details of all of this, but evidently there was a woman who worked at Home Depot who they got fired because she said some fucked up things about the shooting after it happened. I don't know the exact details. I don't know if she was oh, they wish they got Trump or something like that, or she was celebrating the guy who did get killed. And then I know there was a influencer or a streamer who just got banned off one of these streaming platforms that I've never heard of before, for basically doing the same thing, basically celebrating the shooting and celebrating the guy or kind of mocking the guy who got killed there. Whatever you think about those people, I gotta say, I hate this. I think it is a total waste of time. I think it's wrong, and I think it accomplishes nothing other than giving up whatever like moral high ground the right had over the left, which, by the way, you know, is something that could be fairly important in like winning more people over to your cause. Because I'm not saying that like the marketplace of ideas is perfect and the best ideas always win, but there are still a good amount of people who are won over by superior ideas or are won over by someone. If one side becomes monsters, they're kind of won over by the side not becoming monsters. On top of that, it's just like, look, what just happened was an assassination attempt against the guy who has been in the crosshairs of the most powerful secretive organizations in the world. They've been attempting to take him out in many different ways. We don't know all the details about what just happened here, but it's pretty clear already that the official story is bullshit. And it is, let's just say where we're at right now is at least it is shocking that this was allowed to happen. And there's a lot of different signs that like this was kind of allowed to happen. Everything in life is a finite resource. You only have so much breath in your lungs. You only have so many hours in a day. You only have so much energy that you can put into anything. And if you're putting that energy rather than adding pressure to get some type of explanation, to get to the truth, which we have a much better shot of getting at than, say, in the JFK assassination or something like that. We got lots of different camera angles and lots of different brilliant people online who can start piecing things together. But instead, you're using that energy to go after a wage worker to get their life ruined because they said something that offended you. I just hate that stuff. I think it's gross and horrible. It feeds into the worst instincts in people to start celebrating ruining somebody's life over what? Who even knows what the situation is with this person? Somebody a little bit unbalanced who said a crazy thing, who works at Home Depot. You want to get them ruined, and you don't think that's like bad for you? You don't think that's bad for your soul to be doing that to other people? And you can sit here and rationalize all day about how the left would do this to you, and so therefore it's okay to go do this to other people. Bullshit. You're rationalizing away this nonsense, and you're not doing it to the left. You're doing it to some lady who worked at Home Depot. It's just, I hate it. It's stupid. It's you becoming everything that you claimed you hated and you claimed you were like rising up against. I just think it's terrible. And it's, I don't care. Like, I don't support anybody losing their social media over anything. I don't care what it was. I don't care how fucked up the comment was, even if it's something like celebrating after somebody dies or something like that. You're either on the side of free speech or you're not. And I'm gonna myself be on that side. So I don't care. I'm not for tech censorship when it was right-wingers who I disagreed with. I'm not for tech censorship when it's left-wingers who I disagree with. And I'm not for getting people fired from hourly wage jobs for having a fucked up political take. Screw all that, man. Just awful.
I agree 100%. There was also an incident with Tenacious D where Kyle, I think the guy's name, made a joke on stage. I was talking about that on Run Your Mouth last night for about 10 minutes. It's I just agree 100%. It's the problem with conservatives where us libertarians can get excited, and then the second they get a slice of power, it's back to church ladies, no video games, no this, no porn, no that. They want to police just as much. They just typically don't have the power to do so, and it's very easy to get suckered in because when they don't have power, they'll use a lot of the rhetoric, which is attractive to us. Hey, let's just have free speech.
That's right. Everybody loves to use the rhetoric of liberty because it's popular and it rings true. and it sounds noble and good. And that's why it's like, and you know, from the perspective of hardcore libertarians, it's like, yeah, no, you like to borrow our shit until it actually matters, and then you don't want any part of it. But the truth is, you're like the same as all the people who were saying they're for free speech until it came to Israel. And then all of a sudden we're not for free speech. And then what are we for? We're for safe spaces on college campuses, right? It's like, oh, okay. So you're full of shit. You're a total hypocrite. You were never fighting for free speech. You were just saying you didn't like things that didn't offend you being censored. But now that's something that does offend you, you want that to be censored. And in the same way, it's like, yeah, you were never really against tech censorship or against any of this stuff. You just wanted to be in control of it, and you want to wield it against who you view as your enemies. Okay, fine, but at least own that. At least own that. It's like, yeah, there were no principles involved in this other than you wanting to wield power, which, okay, like I could even accept that, but the people cheering this on, you're not even wielding any power. The only power you're wielding is to ruin some lady who's a hourly wage laborer at Home Depot and ruin her life. Congratulations. You got some real power there. It's like the tiniest little bit of power being wielded simply to ruin someone's life who is in no position to exercise any power herself. I hate all that stuff. And the Tenacious D thing, yeah, now that you mentioned, I forgot about that, but I did see it. It's like, yeah, it was a bad joke. You know, I think it was said with the intention of like hitting a laugh. It wasn't good, you know, but okay. Yeah. I defend bad jokes. Yeah, I'll go down with that sinking ship.
I tweeted, bad jokes need your support. Cue the Sarah McLachlan music.
That's really funny. Well, I hope it's one of the most brilliant lines that I've ever heard in comedy from the late, great Patrice O'Neill, where he said that he said hilarious jokes and bad jokes start at the same place, you know? And like, it's got to be something in your head that you're like, I think this is going to be funny. And then you say it out loud and then you kind of find out whether it was good or not. And every comedian, your favorite comedian ever, whether you love Patrice O'Neill or Bill Burr or Dave Chappelle or whoever your favorite, you know, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, they've all told really unfunny jokes. Every one of them has had stinkers. You know, and then they have gems, but they got to be free to give you the stinkers also. So it's true for comedians. It's also just true in general with people that if you want to have an environment where people are allowed to give their thoughts on things, then it either all has to be okay or none of it is. The old South Park logic. All right. Let's wrap up the show there. Don't forget, guys, partoftheproblem.com is launching on Monday, the 22nd. Very excited for the rollout of this. And I hope you guys can go over and support the show. We're going to be bringing you more content, more goodies, the return of the Part of the Problem Inner Circle. I'm very excited for all of it. All right. Catch you guys next time. Peace.